Thursday, August 6, 2026, African American Studies 10. Of course, we're looking at Painter and Ellison. We're looking at Black culture and literature. We're looking at segregation. And we're also looking at the question of fatherhood in the novel. Okay. When we say fatherhood scripts and fatherhood authority, we are saying a couple of things about Ellison's work in Invisible Man. It is, as Eric Sundquist says, the novel or a novel, but I tend to call it the novel about segregation. It reveals the inner workings, right, of this system of segregation. One example is when we look at the spectacle of Blackness that is often viewed by, in the novel, in particular, the grand white men of the town. We are recognizing that they are not simply consuming entertainment, but entertainment for the purpose of keeping these Black folk in their place and elevating their orientation, right? Toni Morrison talks about this in her new book called Language is Liberation, where many early authors, she talks about Hawthorne, Melville, etc., utilize the denigrated presence of African Americans as a way to define the shadow of whiteness, right? To define whiteness as virile and pure by defining Blackness, right, as wretched and ridiculous, okay? And she gives many examples. But Ellison does this in The Invisible Man so eloquently because he's basically showing you that these men in the town that invite them to the battle royale are there for entertainment, but the entertainment, right, is particular to this notion of the social hierarchy. It's to inflict, right, not just them knowing their place, but white supremacy proper. So too, when we look at the novel, right, so that's an explanation of what do we mean by it's a novel of segregation? It's one thing to say it's the laws in society. What Ellison does is that he gets under the hood to help us to see, oh, this entertainment thing is pretty big. Because that's how we can make the comparative between then and now, right? We ask ourselves about entertainment and for what purposes now, looking at the segregated system and how Ellison gets under the hood to show us more parts of the system of segregation. So too, when it comes to fatherhood, he is talking about something extremely important. This notion of the father, of course, in Western European society and generally in human society represents the notion of authority, right? Kind of in many cases, usually just, check the holy book. It's always God-given and men should do this and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, patriarchy is 2,000 years old, right? The further you go back, right, the more you see there's some shifts in terms of how we view the world and how we view men. But when we say fatherhood scripts, what we're looking for is, right, on the one hand, right, talked about this yesterday, who's your daddy, right? Meaning the founding fathers are a particular kind of authority and therefore the daddies, right, of the country, right? To understand daddiness, right, fatherhoodness is to understand not only the contradictions within these men, but how these cracks and fissures create the structure that we have. They are blindly in contradiction, right, to themselves when they say, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. So Ellison is actually critiquing not just white men, but fatherhood in and of itself, okay? So he does that in a broad way. When we encounter Invisible Man and his early conflict with the blonde man with the blue eyes that doesn't see him, right? That is also a metaphor for the country itself. The vast disrespect, right, towards Black people who created $40 trillion of wealth for the country, right? It is embodied by the man just walking by Invisible Man and bumping him like he didn't even see him, then cursing him and calling him names. That's a critique on fatherhood, right? But more specifically, he's talking about the quest for fatherhood, right?